Before fast food and delivery apps, supper meant beans soaking on the stove, potatoes frying in saved drippings, and bread baked to stretch another day. Through the Depression and wartime rationing, these plates kept families going. Tonight we revisit 25 meals our grandparents used to survive and remember why they mattered. 1. Soup, beans, skillet, cornbread. A pot of dried pinto or brown beans breathes gently on the stove, a ham bone or fatback scrap giving the broth a little backbone. The beans take their time, softening, while onion and a bay leaf, if one's handy, round the edges. Salt waits until the end, the old rule so skins don't toughen. In the oven, a cast iron skillet turns cornmeal batter into a golden, crumbly round that cracks when you tap it. This meal made sense because it was dependable. Dry beans lived on pantry shelves for months, and cornmeal came cheap from the mill or store. Pork trimmings, saved, traded, or gifted, stretched flavor without costing much. Supper didn't need drama, it needed enough. Meaning lived in small rituals. A ladle passed clockwise, a square of cornbread broken by hand, a line about pot liquor said with a smile. When money thinned, these two stayed faithful. They filled bowls, soothed tempers, and made kitchens smell like home. Proof that steadiness can be delicious. 2. Potato, onion hash with drippings. A spoon scrapes the jar on the back of the stove, saved drippings from breakfasts and Sunday dinners. It slides into the skillet and melts clear, ready for thin sliced potatoes and onions. First, the heat stays low so the centers relax. Then it climbs, snapping the edges into a crisp, browned lace. A sprinkle of salt and pepper is all it asks. This plate existed because sellers kept potatoes all winter, and onions never argued with a tight budget. Drippings were insurance, nothing wasted, everything useful, turning plain starch into something you could smell from the porch. It worked beside almost anything. Beans, eggs, a scoop of cabbage, a cup of gravy saved from yesterday. Meaning arrived in sound and scent. The quiet hiss, the sweet onion, the crust you chase with your fork. Hash didn't pretend to be fancy. It was weeknight honesty, hot and fast, ready when pay was late or chores ran long. A skillet and a careful hand could turn almost nothing into supper. 3. Macaroni tomatoes. Elbows of macaroni tumble in boiling water until tender. Then meet a pan of stewed tomatoes softened with sliced onion and a little fat from the jar. The sauce isn't thick. It's bright and loose, slipping between noodles and staining them red. Sometimes a pinch of sugar or pepper shows up, sometimes not. Taste led the way. This bowl made sense because pasta could be bought for pennies, and canned tomatoes stacked neatly in the cupboard, waiting for nights when the market felt far. In mill towns and rail blocks, it was the 5 o'clock miracle, quick, filling, and friendly to leftovers. Meaning lived in the color and the comfort. It was the promise that supper could be on the table before stories finished, a warm plate that traveled well to a neighbor who needed it more. Next day, the pot reheated without complaint, and a heel of bread wiped it clean. It asked little and gave a lot, which is what those years required. 4. Cornmeal mush, fried next day. Evening brings a pot of cornmeal whisked into bubbling water until it turns smooth and thick, pouring like lava into a pan to cool. Supper is a simple bowl, soft, warm, a pat of something on top if the week's gone kind. Then the trick. By morning it's firm enough to slice. Those pale slabs hit a hot skillet and come away with crisp, golden faces and creamy middles. Cornmeal was everywhere and always, cheap and steady, and one pot meant 2 meals without extra cost. It tasted different each time depending on what joined it: molasses, milk, a spoon of gravy, a fried egg if the hen was generous. Meaning was in the stretch, the way one night cared for the next morning, and the next morning sent comfort back in return. Kids remembered the crunch, grandparents remembered the thrift. Mush didn't apologize for being plain. It made a plan, kept it, and turned a thin pantry into a rhythm you could count on. Creamed tuna on toast. A quick white gravy starts with drippings or a knob of butter, then milk, then patience, whisked until it looks like comfort. In goes canned tuna, drained, flaked, mild, and maybe a handful of peas if the freezer or garden says yes. Ladled over toast or boiled potatoes, it lands as a soft, savory blanket that makes a small table feel full. This dish made sense in ration years and thin seasons because tins held steady on shelves, and milk stretched flavor farther than meat alone. It looked like company food but cost weekday money, which is exactly what families needed. Meaning lived in the hush that falls when first bites prove the plan worked. It reminded people that a pantry could solve problems if you knew its language. A can opener, a whisk, a little heat, and a level head. When pay envelopes were light, creamed tuna carried dignity to the plate. No fuss, no shame, just a gentle, reliable meal that held the night together. Cabbage wedges and potatoes share the same pot, a plain supper that softens into comfort as it cooks. The water turns lightly sweet from the cabbage. The potatoes break just at the edge, ready to take on flavor. When they're tender, a drizzle of saved fat or a small knob of butter finishes the bowl. No tricks beyond timing. Salt at the right moment, lid on until the steam does its work, then off to let a little moisture lift away. It made sense because both vegetables grew well, stored well, and didn't ask for much money or attention. Gardens and root cellars gave households something certain when pay wasn't, meaning lives in that calm, steady plate, bulk without bravado, a dinner that brought voices down after a hard day. You could feed a family with it, and no one felt shortchanged. Simple on purpose, it reminded people that quiet food can still carry a whole evening. 7. Hobo stew, stone soup pot. A dented kettle sits over a common fire, and into it go whatever the block can spare. Carrots, a potato, a piece of onion, a heel of cabbage, maybe a scrap of meat if luck's kind. The pot simmers long enough to make strangers into neighbors. Someone brings bread, someone else brings salt. The method is more social than technical. Gather, share, stir, wait. In camps, alleys, and near rail yards, this stew made sense because no single pocket could fund a meal, but a handful of pockets together could work a small miracle. It tasted different every time and somehow always familiar. The meaning was bigger than the bowl, a lesson that survival improves with company, that dignity doubles when it's shared. You didn't measure success in richness, but in how many spoons fit around the rim, how many stories softened as the steam lifted, and how much was left for the last person to arrive. 8. Rice brown gravy. A pot of rice cooks to soft, separate grains while a skillet turns drippings and browned flour into honest gravy. Liquid goes in a splash at a time, whisked until the color deepens and the shine appears. Poured hot over the rice, it becomes a wide, warming bowl that eats like a full meal. The method is kitchen logic learned by heart. Save the fat, scrape the fond, coax flavor from what's left behind. It made sense because rice was cheap and steady, and gravy turned scraps into something that felt complete. If a little onion or pepper showed up, all the better. If not, the comfort still landed. Meaning sits in the first spoonful. How heat and starch quiet the day and put a floor under hunger. It's not fancy, but it is generous in its way, reminding a table that thrift can taste good, and that care often travels through the simplest sauces. 9. Hand-killed lettuce with beans bread. First greens from the garden meet a skillet sizzle, hot bacon drippings, a splash of vinegar, maybe a pinch of sugar to balance. The dressing hits the bowl and the lettuce wilts on contact. Killed, as folks say, though what really happens is a gentle taming of bitterness. Beans stand by, pintos or white, and a slice of bread waits to catch whatever escapes the fork. The how is quick and sure. Heat fat, brighten it, pour while it's singing. It made sense because spring came before pay often did, and a little pork could turn a salad into supper. The flavor marked a season as clearly as any holiday. Meaning is both practical and joyful. The shock of green after brown months, the proof that small gardens and small jars keep families moving forward. It's a plate that tastes like hope, grounded by beans and bread, so the moment lasts longer than the bowl does. 10. Cabbage noodles, haluski style. Shredded cabbage hits a pan with fat and patience until edges caramelize and the room smells sweet and savory at once. Buttered egg noodles fold in, catching the browned bits and onion strands like they were made for each other. Pepper wakes it up, salt seals it. The method traveled with immigrant cooks and settled happily in mill towns where money was tight, and dinners needed to be both fast and filling. Cabbage was cheap and kept well. Noodles were affordable and friendly to a crowd. It made sense because every step honored thrift without giving up comfort. meaning lives in its everydayness. The weeknight plate that never announced itself and yet always disappeared first. The taste that crossed languages at the table. In blocks where shifts changed the clock, this dish kept time, simple, steady, and beloved, reminding everyone that heritage can be served with a single pan and eaten with gratitude. 11. Navy bean soup. A pot of white beans soaks while the stove warms, then goes on low with onion and a scrap of pork rind or bone for backbone. Hours pass into a gentle simmer that softens every bean and perfumes the kitchen. A few ladles get mashed back in to make the broth feel richer than it is. Then everything settles into bowls with bread close by. Government-issue beans and long-keeping onions made this possible when pay ran thin. A saved bone or rind turned water into supper. Cafeterias ladled it, church basements ladled it, and home tables did the same. Familiar, cheap, and steady. The comfort wasn't just heat, it was predictability, a meal that behaved itself and asked for little. In a season when worries multiplied, navy bean soup subtracted one, spoon by spoon, and reminded families what patience can do. 12. Hot dogs, baked beans. The pan of beans thickens slowly, sweet with molasses and a little smoke, while a few hot dogs blister in a skillet or on a grill grate. Plates come together fast. A spoon of beans, a frank split or whole, maybe a smear of mustard, maybe none at all. This worked because both pieces were inexpensive, ration-friendly, and everywhere. From corner stores to summer stands, it read like a picnic even when the table was a crate, and kids ate it without bargaining. The flavor was bigger than the budget, which counted for a lot. On long weeks, this plate said yes to seconds and yes to smiles, and if you added a slice of bread, it felt complete. Sometimes history needs a feast. Sometimes it needs a meal that simply shows up on time and tastes like togetherness. 13. Fried bologna sandwich plate. A thick round of bologna hits a hot skillet and sings, edges scored so it won't cup as it browns. The slice takes on color and a little char, then lands on soft bread with mustard if the jar isn't empty. Potatoes, fried or boiled, often stand by. Cheap deli counters kept bologna within reach. The frying turned it from ordinary into something that felt like a treat. It was skillet fast, 5 minutes to better, and friendly to hungry teenagers and tired shift workers alike. The pleasure was honest, salty, smoky, a hint of crisp. Payday might bring ham, most days brought this, and no one complained. A fried bologna sandwich plate didn't pretend to be more than it was, and that was the point. A small luxury shaped by heat and attention, turning a thin wallet into a thick bite. 14. Creamed peas on toast. A white sauce starts in the pan, fat and flour whisked smooth. Then milk joins to soften everything into a gentle gloss. Peas slip in at the end, tender and green, and the whole mixture gets spooned over toast or split biscuits that drink it in. Canned or frozen peas made this easy. Pantry staples did the rest. It was a soft supper that soothed sharp days, the kind children met with open forks and adults met with relief. No measurements needed beyond memory. The sauce told you when it was right. In rooms where budgets were measured to the penny, this plate felt kind. It warmed quickly, stretched far, and kept talk calm around the table. A reminder that simple food can carry more comfort than it costs. 15. Tomato gravy over biscuits. Onion browns lightly in saved drippings, tomatoes tumble in with their juice, and the skillet simmers down to a bright, savory gravy. Split biscuits wait, fresh if you're lucky, day-old if you're careful, ready to catch the red. Gardens and canning kettles kept tomatoes around. Biscuit dough came together from what most cupboards held. The combination turned odds and ends into a plate with presents. It tasted like a long week finally settling, like color returning to a tired face. You didn't need meat. You needed warmth, bread to mop, and a minute to breathe. Tomato gravy over biscuits gave that back. Red sauced comfort with a price tag small enough to manage and a memory big enough to last. 16. Red beans rice, Gulf South. A Monday pot of small red beans simmered low until creamy, then ladled over a hill of rice that made every bowl feel generous. The how was patient and practical. Soak if you could, add an old ham bone or a sausage heel if you had one, and let time turn starch and scraps into comfort. It made sense because beans were cheap, rice was steady, and tradition was strong. Monday was laundry day, so supper had to watch itself. Corner stores sold beans by the scoop, rice stretched the pot to welcome a neighbor. Meaning lives in the rhythm, a week reset by steam and spice, a table that fed many without fuss, a taste of New Orleans thrift that traveled far beyond the Gulf. For canned salmon patties, a tin opened onto pink flakes and soft bones that mashed right in, mixed with crumbs and an egg before shallow frying into crisp, tender cakes. The pan did most of the talking. Quick sear, careful flip, a little browning that smelled like a treat. This worked because railroads brought tins inland, prices stayed reachable, and the shelf life made planning possible when pay was uncertain. Gravy, noodles, or a squeeze of lemon if you had it turned seafood night into a small celebration, even 1,000 miles from the coast. The meaning is in the illusion made honest. A nickel's worth of ocean, hot on a plate, giving families variety without breaking the week. 18. Potato soup with bread. Ends, onions softened in the pot. Potatoes followed, and water, or milk if fortune smiled, turned it into a thin soup that thickened when a few chunks were crushed against the side. The method was mercy itself. Simmer gently, season simply, serve warm with every stray crust and heel meant for sopping. It made sense because potatoes and milk stretched forever, and the soup welcomed what the day allowed. An extra carrot, a knob of butter, a sprinkle of chives from the yard. This bowl quieted rooms and tempers, asking nothing more than time and a spoon. Meaning came as a soft landing on hard days, a reminder that the kindest dinners aren't always rich. They're reliable. 19. Peanut butter syrup or honey sandwiches. A spoon of peanut butter loosened with syrup or honey spread thick across bread turned into a fast supper that didn't mind being cut in halves for small hands. The how was as simple as a stir, a smear, and a stack. No stove, no waiting. It made sense because jars lasted, sugar was cheap, and bread was whatever the bakery sold at day's end. Lunchbox food stepped into the evening when cash ran thin, delivering something sweet, salty, and sustaining without ceremony. The meaning sat in its honesty, a sandwich that told the truth about a week, yet still felt like a treat when the lights were low and tomorrow needed planning. 20. Corn pone with molasses. Hands patted cornmeal into sturdy cakes and set them by hearth or heavy iron to bake until the edges turned firm and the centers held. A swipe of molasses, cane, or sorghum finished each piece with a dark shine that tasted like stored sun. It made sense because corn grew where wheat wouldn't, mills were local, and sweetener kept through winter. The recipe asked little more than fire and patience. Pone traveled well in pockets and pails, feeding field crews and school children alike without crumbling into nothing. Meaning is the old-time promise it kept. Fuel first, flavor close behind. A quiet guarantee that a thin pantry could still send people out strong. Coming up, the canned, smoked, and skillet favorites that turned scarcity into tradition. 21. Succotash with cornbread, corn, and lima beans settle into a gentle simmer with onion and a spoon of saved fat, turning the pot silky and sweet as the colors soften. It's a side by name, but with a square of cornbread leaning against the bowl, it eats like supper, warm, friendly, and complete. The method is quiet. Season simply. Let the beans go tender, let the corn release its milk, and stop while the kernels still have life. Gardens made it likely. Freezers and cans kept it handy. Field corn's sweet spots did half the work. This meal made sense because it multiplied itself. One pot, one pan, many plates, meaning lives and how it brightens a thin week without pretending to be fancy, how it feeds children gently and adults gratefully. You taste late summer in January and a neighbor's generosity in every spoon, proof that just a side can carry the evening by being colorful, kind, and enough. 22. Cabbage hot dog skillet. A skillet starts with sliced franks finding color, then shredded cabbage rains in and softens under a lid before the heat rises to bring back sizzle and browning. Steam sweetens the cabbage, fat from the sausage seasons every strand. Pepper wakes the whole pan. 2 cheap items, 1 pan, and 10 minutes of attention turn into a plate that fills bowls and calms hunger fast. That's why it showed up on weeknights when overtime was uncertain and homework stacked high. No special trip, no long list, just what the fridge already knew. The smell is half the pleasure, the snap of a bite the rest, and kids learn quickly that cabbage can taste like something they asked for. Meaning is practical and affectionate, a parent's quick save, a supper that smiles back without costing tomorrow's lunch. In a hard season, this dish proved that thrift could be lively and that a skillet could solve more than dinner. 23. Egg gravy on toast or biscuits. Milk gravy whisks itself smooth in a pan, a little fat, a little flour, slow circles, then chopped hard-cooked eggs fold in and turn the sauce gentle and rich. Ladled over toast or split biscuits, it covers a plate like a warm blanket and suggests Sunday even when it's Tuesday night. Backyard hens kept the egg bowl opaque with promise. A pantry could always spare what the sauce needed. It made sense because it stretched protein without strain. Changed the conversation from not enough meat to pass another slice, and gave small appetites something soft to meat. The method was memory-driven, not measured. Cook until it looks right, season until it tastes kind. Meaning settles with the steam, a bit of ceremony in a modest kitchen, the feeling that someone took care with your supper. In the ledger of hard times, Egg Gravy wrote a hopeful line, special without being expensive, generous without being loud. Or sardines, crackers with onions. A tin opens with that small metal sigh, and there they are. Firm sardines glistening in oil, ready for a plate with saltines, thin onion slices, and a quick splash of vinegar. No stove, no waiting. Just assemble, sit, and let briny strength do the talking. Nickel tins rode rails and filled lunch pails. Dock workers, section crews, and families at home trusted them for a meal that traveled and kept. It made sense because fish doesn't need a coastline when it comes in a can, and crackers ask for nothing more than a steady hand. The flavors are clean and direct: salt, acid, crunch, and the sweetness of onion, and they wake the mouth after a day that dulled it. Meaning is independence, a supper that stands up all by itself that you can carry to a porch step, a depot bench, or a quiet table and still feel cared for. It's small, sturdy, and surprisingly elegant in its honesty. 25. Baked rice pudding, supper sweet. Rice meets milk and sugar in a deep dish with raisins and a whisper of nutmeg, then goes to a slow oven until the top bronzes and the center sets to a tender wobble. The spoon breaks the skin and finds warmth that tastes like relief, a dessert that's allowed to be dinner when the week's been rough. Cheap staples made it possible. The oven did the steady work. A sprinkle of spice made the room feel richer than the ledger looked. It made sense because it fed many with little, kept well for breakfast that needed kindness, and asked only patience in return. Meaning arrives in quiet moments, the hush that falls as bowls cool in hands, the way children lean into the sweetness and adults into the calm, the sense that tomorrow might be softer. In hard seasons, rice pudding was a soft landing, proof that comfort can be baked from very little and still fill a room with gratitude. Across lean years of depression and wartime, families leaned on dry goods, gardens, scraps, and skill. Beans soaked while chores were done. Saved fat turned into gravies that made plain starch feel generous. Yesterday's mush fried up crisp for today's plate. Time, smoke, and memory made flavor when money couldn't. Side dishes often stepped forward and became dinner. A pot of succotash with a square of cornbread. Tomato gravy that made day-old biscuits feel fresh. Rice under brown pan drippings that tasted bigger than the budget. Church shares and neighborhood pots filled the gaps, one ladle at a time, proving that a thin pantry, handled with care, could still feed a crowd. What holds these meals together is more than thrift. It's judgment learned by watching. When beans are ready, when gravy shines, when a skillet says, enough. It's hospitality that doesn't wait for plenty. A plate passed first to a child. A saved jar opened when someone knocks at supper time. In hard seasons, these quiet choices kept households steady. If any dish here stirred a memory, let it travel. Tell us which meal you'd bring back to your table, or which one your grandparents kept alive. Maybe it's soup beans and cornbread, maybe rice pudding on a rough week, maybe cabbage and noodles after a long shift. Share your story, add your family's hard times supper to the list, and pass one more plate of care down the line. Drawn from WPA and wartime home economics pamphlets, community and church cookbooks, period newspapers, oral histories, and extension service bulletins from the 1930s through the 1950s. Names and habits varied by town and budget. But the spirit was the same. Make enough from a little and share when you can. Historical best effort. Sources noted in description. Vintage cookbooks, newspapers, oral histories, archives.